Hi everyone. So if you remember from the last video, we basically created this. So we have a character that slides in, and then we have a rotating wind turbine animation. So the next step would be to add dialog text so we can make our character say something on the screen. So if you haven't watched the video about the spinning wind turbine and adding a character, I would recommend watching that first. So this is part 2 of the LVNAuth tutorial series. And again, in this video, we're going to add some dialog text for our character here. So the way that fonts and dialog text work in LVNAuth is LVNAuth doesn't actually use fonts in a traditional sense. So it doesn't use the same fonts as what you would find in a word processor, for example. Instead, what it does is it uses font sprite sheets, which are essentially images that contain letters. So here's an example of a font sprite sheet. So we basically have individual characters that are spaced apart. And this particular font sprite sheet is all on one line. It doesn't have to be, but that's just the way this one is laid out. And this is essentially a PNG file, and we can use a font sprite sheet with our visual novel in LVNAuth. In fact, a lot of video games will use font sprite sheets like this as well. And this is what our visual novels in LVNAuth will also use. So how do we actually get a font sprite sheet? Well, there are two ways. You can create one yourself. So if you're good at creating letters, and then if you're good at drawing and things like that, you can actually create one yourself. Or there is one available on LVNAuth's website. So if you go to LVNAuth.org, and then if you click on tutorials at the top, there is a section here that says font sprite sheet tutorials. And then this one specifically, it says font sprite sheet properties. When you click on that, there's one here that's available for download, which is actually the same one that I showed you earlier. So essentially this one. And it's a zip file, so you can go ahead and download that. And once it's been downloaded, and once you extract the zip file, you'll have a file that's named like this. So that's the name of the font sprite sheet. And then at the end here, it says 30 and then 42. Those are the dimensions. So the width of each of the characters is 30 pixels wide and 42 pixels high. So that's for the height. So 30 by 42. So we'll actually need those dimensions later for LVNAuth. Okay, so now we can go into LVNAuth. Under font sprite sheets here on the left-hand side, click on add image and add the PNG font sprite sheet that we just downloaded. Okay, and then once you locate the PNG file, it'll get added to the list here. So now there's a font sprite sheet added to our project. The next thing that we need to do is we need to double click on it. So go ahead and double click on it. And then you'll see this dialog window open here. So notice at the top that it's asking for the width and the height of of the letters in the font sprite sheet. So in this case, it's conveniently labeled as part of the font sprite sheet name. So 30 width and 42 height. So let's go ahead and type that in. So 30 and 42. These dimensions are specific to this font sprite sheet. If you use a different one, you'll have to change them accordingly. So I'm gonna, once you type the dimensions in, click on split. And what it does is it basically slices all the letters into individual images or individual characters. In other words, it doesn't look like this anymore. It's been sliced into individual letters, and that's why we need to type the dimensions in. The dimensions are for each of the letters or the characters in our font sprite sheet. Okay, so you'll notice that there's an empty one in the beginning. That's for a space character. So, and then we have all these text boxes here at the bottom. So we need to actually type the characters that these images represent, because as far as LVNAuth is concerned, these are just images. So our visual novel doesn't know what these images are and what they represent. We need to tell it and to help it define what these images represent. So the first one is blank, so that's going to be a space. So in the text box, go ahead and just type a single space. This one's an exclamation mark, so I'm going to type that, a quote. So you basically just type in the character that these are representing here. And I'm going to fast forward this until I type all of them in. Oh, and you can actually use the tab key on the keyboard to go to the next text box. Okay, so I have all of mine filled out here. So all the letters have been typed. So once you finish that, click on OK at the bottom, and then just click on Save at the top here so you can save your project. Okay, so now that we have our font sprite sheet added and we have all the individual characters and letters typed in, we need to bring up a dialog for the text to appear in. So to do that, I'm going to click on my scene. In this case, it's called Introduction. And I'm going to just go to the bottom here and then click on the wizard. There's a section here called Dialog. And then specifically the top command here, it says text dialog define. So here we can specify the dimensions of the dialog area. So I'm going to leave it as the default, so 400 pixels wide and 200 pixels high. And we can tell it where we would like the dialog area to appear. And right now it's set to the bottom, the mid bottom, so that's fine. I'll just leave it as that. We can specify the animation. I'm just going to leave it as the default for now. Colors. So in the opacity level. So I'm going to make this about, let's say 160 for the opacity level. And I won't have a border here now, although we could add one. And there's some padding as well, which we'll come back to. Okay, so let's just try clicking OK just to see what we're going to get. So we can see that it generated a command for us based on what we selected. I didn't really change much of the settings, so a lot of it's going to just be based on the default. So this is defining what our dialog rectangle or area will eventually look like, but it's not going to show it on the screen. So if I save this project and play it, we can see there's still no dialog area being shown. Okay, so the next step would be to actually show the dialog area. So I'm going to go back into the wizard and then go to dialog, and then text dialog show is the command that we want. Okay, and then we'll save the project and then run it again. Okay, so we can see a dialog area that's slowly animating. And those are based on the default values, and I see two issues with that. One is that the animation was too slow, and the second is that the dialog area is too small. I wanted to almost cover the whole width of this window here of my visual novel. Okay, So what I can do is I can just modify the values here. I can tell that this is the width and this is the height. For the rest of them, it may not be so obvious. So what I'm going to do is, instead of just modifying this and that, because I also want to speed up the animation and I don't recall which of these is the animation, I'm going to just comment this out. So it's deactivated. I'm just adding a number sign here so it sees it as a comment. So it's not going to actually run it. And instead, I'm going to go back into text dialog define, and I'm going to type in some of the values which I think will be better. So I'm going to type in 700 for the width. Let's try 140 for the height. And animation speed, that's definitely too slow. So let's change that to, let's try 70 and see what that gives us. The opacity level, I want to make it less. So let's try maybe 120. And another thing I noticed is that the text box was actually flat against the bottom of the visual novel. I want to add some spacing so it's not so close to the edge. So I'm going to add some Y padding here. So let's try 5. And then I'm going to click on OK, save, and we'll run it again. All right, that's instantly better. First of all, the animation was much quicker, and it's now covering a wider area. And I can see that the bottom is no longer touching the bottom of the window because I added a padding of 5 for the vertical padding. So I'm happier with this. And the transparency is more as well. So the opacity has been decreased, which I think looks nicer. And we can adjust this later if needed. So, and again, you can alter the values here if you know which ones are which. So I remember 5 is the vertical padding, and this here is the speed. And this is the opacity. So I can actually increase this to 140 and it should be a little darker now. Yeah, and it is. So maybe I'll change that to 130 so it's kind of in between of what we had before. There we go. So the next step would be to actually add some text to this dialog area. So to do that, all we have to do is actually just type text without any special commands. So text shown in LVNAuth, like dialog text, is typed with no commands at all. So I'm just going to write here, this is a test. And this will cause this to show up. But we also need halt at the bottom to show that it needs to stop here. Yeah, so I guess there is a little bit of a command needed so that the viewer has a chance to read what's on the screen. Okay, so let's just go ahead and save this and preview it. Okay, so we finally have some text displayed on the screen. That's definitely a good start. But the problem is obvious. The spacing between the letters is too much. So that just doesn't look right, although it's definitely a good start. So why is there spacing here? Well, the reason is, if we go back into the font sprite sheet properties, so if I double click on the font sprite sheet, I'm just going to go back in here and click on split again. You know, all our letters and everything are still there. But what it's doing is it's actually putting the letters next to each other, and it's also including the space of each of the letters next to each other as well. So it's causing extra spacing to show up. An easy fix for that is this checkbox here, automatically detect letter edges. So what this will do is it'll shave off any excess spacing around the letters so that the letters are closer to each other. In other words, it'll ignore any spaces around the letters. So let's try that out and see how it looks. So I have this one checked now. It's a checkbox. I'm going to click OK, save, and let's go to play current scene. Yep, that instantly looks better. So we can see that the excess spacing has been removed around the letters because now it's automatically detecting where the space is around the letters. But one other issue I see is that the regular spaces are still a bit too much. Like the spacing between the words is too much. So I want to decrease that. So how do we do that? Well, I'm going to close this visual novel again, and I'm going to double click on the font sprite sheet once again. And you'll notice that we're going to be visiting this font dialog properties window a lot, especially in the beginning when you're still fine-tuning the font sprite sheet. But eventually, once it's done, you won't really have to bother with this window anymore. But in the beginning, you will. Okay, so what you could do is, in this section here, it has a kerning values list. And this is where you can give it rules for the amount of spacing that it applies for letters or characters that are next to each other. Like, for example, you can say if the letter A is being shown now, then, and if the letter before it is the letter R, then add 2 pixels of spacing. And if the letter before it is F, show 5 pixels of spacing, for example. There is no right or wrong way to configure that. It's just personal taste and how far apart you want letters to be. I'll show you an example. So again, my problem here is that the spacing between the words is too much. So I want to click on add here. And the problem is the spacing. So in the letter area, I'm going to put a space. And then I have 2 options here. How do I want to apply this rule? Regardless of the previous letter, or only when the previous letter is something specific? And you can specify more than one letter here. So in this case, it doesn't matter what letter is before it. What I want to do is I want to decrease the spacing. So for the right, I'm going to specify let's try -4. So it's not showing a letter here because it's a space. So for the space character, regardless of which letter is before the space character, it's going to trim the right side of that space by -4. Okay, so I'm going to click on OK, and let's try it. Yeah, it's less. It's still a bit too much though. Let's try decreasing it. So -4, I'm going to try -7. It might be too much, but we'll see. No, it's still okay. Still okay. We can actually decrease the spacing a bit more even. I'm going to try -10 this time. Yeah, so this is definitely better. So what I've done is I've told it to take the right side and to bring it backwards if it sees a space. So when it sees a space, it's pulling the right side over to the left. So yeah, right now the spacing looks better. If you do it too much, what will happen is, like, I'm going to give it a much different value. Let's try like -30, which actually it's only going to let me go up to -29 because it knows the maximum width for the letter. So in this case, -29 is my limit. for your font sprite sheet, it might be different, because you'll notice the width is 30 for the individual character. So mine only lets me go up to -29. So yours might be different. So I'm going to give it a value of -29, which is going to look bad. Yeah, and you can see that it's now all squished right next to each other. So I just wanted to show you what it looks like if you give it a value that's too high. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a value of -10 because I'm quite happy with that. And that's basically how you show dialog text. Okay, so we're obviously not done. There are some improvements that can be made. One of the improvements is the text is way too close to the edges of the dialog area. So I wanted to go down below, maybe like somewhere around here. So the font area actually starts at 0 up here. And as you go down, it increases in height. So notice my mouse pointer. My mouse pointer, if I go to the top, the Y is 0. And if I go down, that Y increases. For text, the Y doesn't start at the top. For dialog text, the Y starts at the top of the dialog area. So even though my mouse is showing 336 for the Y coordinate, it's going to be 0 for the dialog area. And same thing for the X. My X is showing 27, but the X is actually 0 here for the dialog text. And then when I move my mouse, it's going to increase. So knowing this, right now, the dialog text is starting at 0, 0. So X0 and Y0, which is right here. So I want to increase the Y and increase the X, but just a little bit. So I want to increase the Y more, so it starts like here somewhere. Okay, so how do I do that? So what I can do is, before I define my dialog or before I show any dialog text, I'm going to click on Wizard. I'm going to click on Font, and then Font X, which is the horizontal position. So I'm going to give it a value of, let's say, 5 pixels, and then we'll do something similar for the Y. So instead of 5 pixels, let's try, well, 20 might be too much. Let's try 15. So 5 pixels across and 15 pixels down. Let's just see if that looks good. Okay, yeah. I need to go down a bit more and maybe a little bit more to the right. But I'm definitely headed in the right direction. So let's try 8 and let's try 25. And you can see a lot of this is based on experimenting. Yeah, that's starting to look good. So the reason why I'm putting a space here at the top is because that's where I want to show the character's name. So let's have our character actually say something instead of, just this is a test. Let's try saying, "Hi there. I hope you're enjoying this tutorial." Maybe that's too long. Maybe it won't fit. Let's try. Yeah, so hi there. I hope you're enjoying this tutorial. And you can see it's getting cut off. So when this happens, it's not going to word wrap over to the next line. That's going to be like something that you would have to deal with, is when it gets, you'll have to preview it and see if it's getting cut off. And if it is, you'll have to alter the sentence by maybe moving it to a third line. So I hope you're enjoying, let's try this tutorial like that. Yeah, so there's a bit of spacing here. So you can see that the amount of spacing that you put in your visual novel affects the feeling of the visual novel as well. So you'll want to come up with words that will fit nicely. So I can change this, instead of "Hi there, I hope you're enjoying this tutorial." "Hi there, this tutorial is fun," like that. Okay, yeah. So it's showing that. So the next thing I was going to show you is the types of dialogue that you can show, like the types of animation, I should say. So right now, if I play that again, you can see that it fades in. And I'll play it again so you can see it. The text is fading in. So that's the type of animation that it's currently set to use. So if I go to the wizard and then expand font, there's a command here called font intro animation. And by the way, if you ever forget what these fonts or what these commands do, when you click on a command, it'll tell you what it's going to do. Like here it says, set the animation type when the character text is being displayed. So the explanations are all right here, so you won't have to like memorize them. Okay, so we have some options to choose from here. Sudden, fade in, gradual letter, fade in. So the one that we're currently using is fade in. So sudden, let's try that. Save and play current scene. It's instant. I'll play it for you again. There is no fading in. It's just right away. And I'm going to delete that, and we'll go to the next animation type. The next one is gradual letter, which is going to show the text letter by letter. I'll play it again so you can see it. And you can alter the speed of the gradual text as well by clicking on font and font text delay. You can see it says sets the number of frames to skip when applying gradual dialog text letter by letter. Does not apply to letter fade-ins. Yeah, so for fading in, that's a different command. You would need this one. Okay, so for this, I'm going to specify a delay here. So let's try 55. So this is the number of frames to delay it by. So the more the higher this goes, the slower it's going to get. So let's try 55 and see what the speed's like. So you can see that it's very, very slow. Okay, we can decrease this to say like 25. Let's see what that is like. Let's try 5. Let's try 2. And let's try 1. And if you set it to 0, it's going at maximum speed. So you can experiment with that. So that's gradual letter. And if we go to the next one, font intro animation. The last one is gradual letter fade in. So you can see it's almost like letter by letter, except it's fading in the letters one by one. So if we go back into font text fade speed, we can specify the speed here. So 1 is the slowest, 10 is the fastest. So let's try to make it slower so you can see what it's doing. So I'll change it to 3 and we'll play it again. Yeah, so you can see what it's doing there. Okay, so I'll leave it as that for now. So what Halt does again is it causes the text to stop and it gives the person a chance to read. Then on the next line, I'm going to type something else. The sky is blue. So I'm obviously not coming up with a lot of unique dialogue text here. So it's going to go through this, it's going to stop, and then it's going to show this, and it's going to stop again. So I'm going to save it. And then when you click with your mouse, it goes to the next dialogue text. So that's how this works here. If you're wanting to use Halt, or if you want an explanation on how to use it, you just click on Wizard and go to Dialog, and you can see there's Halt here. There's also a Halt Auto, which will automatically proceed to the next dialog text if you wanted to do that. And there's some other commands related to showing dialog text as well if you want to check those out. So those are the fundamentals on using dialog text with LVNAuth. The biggest commands that you'll need are really so first you have to like define the dialog area, the dimensions and what it looks like and the colors, and then you can show the dialog text or the not the dialog text, the dialog rectangle, like the area, and then the dialog text is typed without any special commands. But in order to make the text stop to give your viewers a chance to read it, you would use the Halt command. So there are still some more things worth noting, but I think this tutorial is getting a bit long, so I don't want to make it too long. So I'm going to stop here. If you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comment section, or you can just go to lvnauth.org, and then there's a discussions link at the top, which I'll show you. Yeah, so if you click on, or not discussions, community. When you click on community, it takes you to a GitHub discussions page where you can ask your questions there as well. So I hope you found this tutorial interesting and useful. Until the next one, thanks for watching.